So that's how, over the last 14, 15 years, I've become a personal recovery coach. So what I do is I join people on their journey at some point, and I help them to, like I was doing just now, you know, I was helping that person to begin to navigate their journey, but I work with people purely on a personal level. So that's me on a professional and a personal level. But the other reason that I think Sarah asked me was because of my my personal story, my personal journey, because I think having learned everything cerebrally, it doesn't touch, does it, having the personal experience of actually losing somebody that you love, or, you know, somebody dying that you have loved very dearly. And when I started as a coach, I had absolutely no idea what was coming in our lives. I thought a divorce was bad enough, but actually no, it was nothing in comparison. So 2009, so we're talking 14 years ago now, my girl's dad, who we weren't actually together, but he was the wonderful father of my two girls, our two girls, died very suddenly. So all immediately we were I mean, I will never have a worse day than the day that I found that out, because it was incredibly sudden. He was 44 years old, and I knew that it was going to be absolutely life-changing for our two children. And it was and has been my goal ever since then to get them into their adult lives healthy, healed and happy. And I have actually achieved that. And actually, I'll just tell you a really lovely story. On Christmas Eve this year, last year, Amy, who's my eldest daughter, she was asked, well, her partner asked her to marry him in our garden. We had these huge, like 4 foot high marry me, and she had absolutely no idea. So, and they've just had a baby, and you know, to see her sister walking behind her, and Polly actually doesn't mind me talking about her. Polly was my biggest challenge after her dad died. She was not in a good space for a very long time, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happens. So we're going to talk about what happens when somebody dies, and how the kind of feelings that we have. I told you about the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross feelings, but I'm going to talk to you about a more contemporary model as well. We're going to talk about how long that journey can be. So we've already touched a little bit on that, and also what can help us navigate the path. So I've got some quite, I would say, quite unique ideas, but they might help you with the people that you're working with. So we had that experience. I had very, very happily found love again, and it was with Rob. And so Rob, when I met him, he was in a wheelchair. So he'd been in a very serious road traffic accident, and for the first 4 years we were together, we had a wonderful, wonderful time. He became a wonderful stepfather to my two children, and supported them when their dad passed away. But very sadly, Rob also passed away 4 years after that, in 2012. And I would say that gave me the biggest experience, if you like, of grief. I was widowed at the age of 45. It's almost 10 years ago now, but I can't even begin to describe what that was like. It was an incredibly difficult time, and I eventually had to leave work for quite a long period of time. But what came out of all of this, and again, we're going back to, I'm still talking about what has brought me here. I've always written, and I'd already brought out my first book, which is called Who Are the Flowers in Your Garden? Because I think about life. If you want to read that book, it tells you the story behind all of that. I won't go into that now, but I started kind of around 2008 thinking about life as being a little bit like a garden. You know, if you don't look after a garden, what happens to it? Who are the people in your life, the flowers in your garden, you know? And it's right, isn't it? We all need people in our lives. You know, for example, with Sarah, you know, at Full Circle Funerals, what a wonderful opportunity people have when they walk through those doors, you know, to meet those, you know, that wonderful team of people, you know, that garden of people that Sarah's grown and continues to grow, because, you know, it's really important, isn't it, who we meet on our journey. So yeah, so what actually happened was I'd started to get this itch to start working again, but I'd also got this itch to start writing. And this was the result. It's called The Grief Garden Path, and it's another coffee table gift book. And it's been really popular, actually. I've been really proud of it. I'm really proud of what's in it. It looks really kind of innocent from the outside, but actually the inside of it talks about, it gives people a very simple, and I think that's why a lot of counsellors, psychotherapists, all sorts of people recommend my book, because it's so simple. And I think people can just pick it up, they can open it at a page, and it gives them, you know, oh, actually, that's interesting. Would you all like me to just tell you where I've opened it? Do you want to put your thumbs up if you want me to? Yeah. So I've opened it up at Amy's Golden Nuggets of Wisdom for You. And I don't know if you can see that, but everybody that shared their story in chapter 3, I got them all to choose something to represent their loved one that had died. And Amy is my daughter, and I interviewed her when she was in Australia. She very kindly agreed to share the loss, you know, the death of a loved parent. So, and these are Amy's Golden Nuggets of Wisdom for You, but she chose a conker tree, which I don't think you can see. Yeah, I think I showed you. A conker tree to represent her dad, because he loved playing conkers, and he had a tree on his dad's farm that he used to love, you know, sitting under and things. So Amy shares with you, and bearing in mind she would, I'm trying to think how old she would have been when she would have been early 20s, or probably 20 when she shared this. Time is the biggest healer. Everyone deals with their grief differently. For example, my experience was very different from that of my sister. So I'll just tell you, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about Polly's story. And actually, if you go to my website, you will see a blog called Nigel. That goes into a lot more detail about actually Nigel's a little dog that I got for Polly for her 18th birthday. And she was angry probably for about 5 years. I remember doing a talk for Break, the national charity, road traffic death charity. And I remember going there, and the prop that I took was a, what's it called? When you change the channels on the TV. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I took the last one that I bought. Sorry, say that again, Sarah.
Remote control. Remote
control, that's the thanks. Yeah, so I remember taking this remote control as the prop, because it was, she used to literally use that as her weapon of choice, and I used to get things thrown at me. I used to get, you know, it was just like this real anger within her. And one day actually we were moving a table, and I said to her, I said, do you remember picking that up and throwing it at me? And she said, not only do I remember it, Mum, but I am so, you know, she said, I'm just so sorry I did that. I said, well, you know, because the kind of anger that you can get within you, you know, I remember feeling really angry with somebody, and I'm not an angry person. I'm really not. But actually, that process that we go through, that kind of those feelings that we go through that can manifest and brew, can be really quite powerful. So yeah, so I just thought I'd touch on that. But there's a really good little, as I say, really good blog if you want to read it. Don't take people you love for granted, Amy says. You don't know how long they will be with you. And I think that's a really, really good one. And then the last one here was appreciate what you have and follow your path. I wonder whose daughter she is. So that was Amy's. So each story, and so as I said earlier, with great love comes great grief, doesn't it? And today we are, and the same with my book, it's purely about the death of a loved one that we're going to be talking about today. So that could be the death of a baby, a child, a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, a husband, a wife, a friend, or even a pet. And I included all of those in chapter 3 of the book because so I started interviewing people about about their loved ones. And I started off actually with the kind of intention that I was looking at how somebody died. And actually, in the end, this took 3 years, believe it or not, to put this book together. But in the end, I just realized it's all about the love that you have for somebody. It's not about how they died. The grief that we feel, the pain that we feel, because grief is pain. And everybody's journey is unique and different, absolutely. But we all have different feelings that can manifest, and that's what I first want to talk about. Those feelings have been studied, they've been looked into, they've been mulled over, but they are real. They are absolutely real. You know, you can get in the very beginning a denial that this has even happened. Some people, you know, they can feel quite elated afterwards. They can feel okay for the first year, maybe even 2 years. Usually it's about a year. And often in the second year, we often start to feel worse. I asked the permission of one of my clients to mention her. I'm not going to mention her name, but she was okay for me to talk about her. I very rarely work with somebody from the actual get-go, but it was a funeral director who'd actually suggested that this particular person, I should, you know, work with her. And I've actually been working with her now for 2.5 years. I generally see people monthly, but what had happened with her was she had a knock on the door. Her husband had gone out cycling. She was still asleep in bed when he left, and basically the police were on the doorstep and they said, you have to get in the car now. She said, but I can't, I'm in my pajamas. They said, it doesn't matter. You know, anyway, she did go and get a jogging suit, bottoms on, but off they went to the hospital. And 5 days later, they had to switch off life support. So within those 5 days, she'd had to make some massive decisions about organ donation. She knew that he wanted to donate his organs. She could barely recognize him. He was so badly injured. They've got 2 children who are in their 20s, but she was having to kind of work her way through all these things. There was an inquest. There was, you know, all sorts of different things that happened in that first year. And each of the way on the journey, I've had to, I guess, reassure her, but also I've had to be very honest with her, because there've been times where, and she's gone through every single emotion, and I've actually had to watch that, and I've actually had to, she was also having counselling, by the way, as well, in parallel with what I was doing with her. So this person, for this person to be at the point she is now, and she's only just, I would say, turned a corner. She's only just now, before Christmas, she was, I would say, she'd been through a very long period of depression. And I was on the verge of, you know, saying to her, actually, I think you need you know, we maybe need to, you know, get somebody else involved. So she saw her doctor. She'd been involved with her doctor anyway, but actually she's actually turned a corner. She's just beginning to feel that the sun's beginning to glint in the distance. But for me to be able to sort of watch that journey, I remember her last year saying, you know, it's feeling even worse. It's feeling even worse. And I'm like, yeah, I'm afraid that's normal. And I think one of the biggest things that perhaps I need to say to all of you today is you need to reassure people that it's normal. It's normal for you to feel like this because you are on your grief garden path. You are on a path, and if you try and get off it, in the end you'll have to come back to it. So, and it's painful, and that's normal to feel like that, but there's the support there. I work very closely with the Good Grief Trust. The reason that £1 from every copy of my book goes to them is because I kind of feel as though I'm supporting the umbrella of all the charities and all the amazing work that's done. We've got somebody from Cruise here today. I can't remember your name, but you know, I feel as though that £1 is going towards all the support, because for me, support is so important. Sorry, I'm going on my soapbox here, but I just think, you know, what I've got Sarah in the book who was under anaesthetic when her baby died, you know, Olivia Grace, and people walked to the other side of the road. She would have been 23 this year. They walked to the other side of the road instead of talking to her. You know, we have to learn to talk to people. We have to learn to be brave. We have to learn to listen. You know, we've got 2 ears. I remember my coach, actually, who's a great friend of mine, another Julie. She said, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. She said, use them in that order, always. Always use them in that order. Because listening to people's stories is surely really important. That's all they need. They just need to, you know, to have that space, that time. So I'm just going to read them through, but you get the denial, you get the anger, you get the depression, you get this bargaining. Did that really happen? Was that, you know, could this, you know, is that person really gone? You know, actually, no. The other thing that I want to say is that I always say to people, the love never dies. The love never dies. It feels as though it's gone, but it hasn't. In the end, you know I'm very happily married again. Very lucky. Never in a million years. I think I'd actually get married 3 times in my lifetime. But you know, marriage for me is important. And but I will always love Rob. Always and forever. I will always love him. And the memories never die. There's a really lovely song, I don't know whether any of you have heard it, called Memories by Maroon 5. And I've got, if anybody would like me to share, I might share it with you, Sarah. I've got a beautiful, it's a children's choir that actually sing that song, and it's so beautiful. And it's about memories, bringing back memories, bring back you. But when we're in the early stages of somebody's death, it's so raw, and we feel as though they've gone because their body is no longer here, their physicality is not here anymore. But actually, in the end, and to watch this person that I've just been telling you about, whose husband was on the bike that day, it's wonderful to hear her starting to talk about him. And actually, she is finally referring to herself as his widow. She couldn't even bring herself to use the word widow. You know, I will always be Rob's widow, always, but I will also have always been his wife. But now I am somebody else's wife. You know, it's so life and the garden path continues. it continues. Your path, your journey through life continues. How long does the grief garden path go on for? Well, some people would say it's infinite. Some people do say it's infinite. But I think the painful bit, it doesn't have to be painful to the end, and it doesn't have to be painful all the time either. You know, grief is like the waves of the sea. I mean, there are little illustrations throughout the whole of my book, and one of them is says the waves do settle and calmer waters appear. And I think that's a reassurance for people that you can all give to people that are grieving and in pain, because it is painful. It's painful on a cellular level. It's painful on every single level. I mean, for me, you know, I became a carer for my husband. I never saw myself as his carer, but effectively I was his carer. Nobody saw what went on behind closed doors, apart from the nurses that came to see us, and when he was in hospital for those last 5 months. I was exhausted. So there's usually an element of both. You know, grieving is exhausting, but also if you've had somebody that's been very poorly for a long period of time, that can also be exhausting. So so this leads nicely on to what can help us. So I talk about, and Sarah knows about this, I talk about the importance of watering you. So if you get nothing else from today, please use it with your clients, with your parishioners, you know, with the people that you work with, in the very early stages. And this can happen, and you can use this for your own lives as well. It's not unique to the people that you're helping at all, but it's in the early stages of any kind of trauma or any kind of, you know, the death of a loved one, which is what we're talking about today. There are 3 things that so it's called basic watering you. So are you ready? Everybody ready? So it's eat, sleep, breathe, repeat. Okay, because now the reason that, so it's eat, sleep, breathe, repeat. Often when we're going through a traumatic time or a difficult time, there are 2 things that can happen with eating. Either we can not eat anything because we haven't got any appetite left. We haven't got any desire to eat. I'll give you an example, actually. I was part of an amazing Facebook group when Rob died, called Young, Widowed and Facing the Future Together. And there was a young girl on there who's well, they actually got married at the hospice. He was diagnosed 5 days before it was 7 days before he died. He actually died. It was just awful. And I remember the day of his funeral, and she'd joined our group. And I remember getting in touch with her and just saying, you know, I'm just thinking about you. And she said, oh, I just don't know. I just don't know. I just don't know what to do. And I said, right, you need to eat something. So I want you to go and make a piece of toast, put some butter on it and some honey, and just make yourself eat it. And she did. And it gave, and actually I told this story to somebody just before Christmas. Her husband had died very suddenly, and apparently she told a friend of mine that she said, Julie New said we had to eat something, so I went out and got some rolls for us all, because her children are just 7, 10 and 14. And so eating is important, but actually overeating or eating the wrong things can also have a detrimental effect on us. So it's about people, you know, thinking about what they're eating. So eating is important. So eat, sleep. So sleep, often we can't sleep. I spent years not being able to sleep properly. In fact, my dog Ben, who's just been taken out for a walk because he's had a bit of a, oh look, cup of tea. There we are. That's Nigel, if you can hear him. That's Nigel that you're going to read the blog about. Tea, excellent. Sorry, Sarah's just got a cup of tea there for anybody that doesn't see that she's got a cup of tea. That's why I'm laughing. So yeah, cups of tea. I mean, in England, we tend to make a lot of tea, don't we? Oh, let's make a cup of tea. With people that are grieving, often a bit of sugar in it is quite a good idea as well. Anyway, going back to sleep. So sleep can evade us. So it's important to make sure people are resting. You know, that they're perhaps going to bed in the afternoon, or, you know, if they're off work, to make sure that, you know, if they do wake up in the night, they might want to do a bit of writing, a bit of journaling, or they might want to put the television on and just distract themselves a little bit. It might be that they need to think about, you know, what their routine is for sleep, because it can evade people. And I mean, let's face it, sleep used to be a form of torture, didn't it? You know, sleep deprivation used to be a form of torture. So it's really, really awful if you can't get sleep. And so rest, I would say, is very important. And then the breathing bit, often, and I remember this from my midwifery days as well, you know, because I was kind of, yeah, I always was very keen on, you know, getting people to breathe properly, because when we're in pain, whether that's emotional pain or physical pain, it's really, really important that we do breathe, because we actually forget to breathe, and so then we become anxious. And then, you know, April, you were saying about, you know, people that you're working with, you know, they're anxious. Well, of course they're anxious, because, you know, they don't know where to go with that, and they're probably not breathing properly, with that kind of anxiety that's building up within them, and that's just purely come from the emotions that have happened through, you know, the death of their loved one. And so, yeah, so those three things: eat, sleep, breathe, repeat. And then what I do is I start to include a little bit of exercise. So, you know, exercise actually is a very important thing as well, because again, we forget, we don't move, we stay, you know, and you know, it's just about moving about. So what I tend to do is I start to get people perhaps going out for a walk, or taking, you know, if they've got a dog, take the dog out. That's what's got the client that I was telling you about earlier out. You know, she has to take him out, so that he's got her out the front door. My Ben got me out the front door every day. He's the only thing that got me out of that front door. And as I say, none of us are immune to grief, I'm afraid. None of us. So yeah, keep watering you. I do a fantastic exercise, which is the Keep Watering You exercise. It's part of my New Chapter program, because what I do is I help people get ready to go into their new chapter, to find their feet. I've got stepping stones coming up to from the cottage up to here, up to Hope HQ, where I work. And that's symbolic of the stepping stones that we take towards, you know, starting our new chapter. But it does not mean that person's not going to come with you, because they will. And they, you know, the love, that, as I say, the love never dies. So that's basically what I wanted to say today. I hope it's been useful in some way. I've rabbited on. I didn't want to use PowerPoint, because I just think we get death by PowerPoint most of the time. And I just wanted to talk to you today. So I hope I haven't rabbited on too long.